John Shaver.
Uncle John.
Well, I guess I should just do a comedy routine. Anyway, I haven't been here all week, as everybody's noticed, but it's, we have this, I don't drive well at night. It's not safe for anybody on the road, let alone myself. And so I thought a couple of times about driving over here, and then Carol would be sitting home worrying about whether I was gonna make it home or not. She's rode with me a couple of times in the dark. I told her it wasn't hard for me, I just closed my eyes and she didn't think that was funny. But anyway, I know you guys are having a good time, and I mean, kind of looking at my place, and we're living in a temporary, we're all living in a temporary dwelling, right? I mean, even the bodies we're in is a temporary place for us. So I kept telling her, she wanted to know, well, are we gonna go out in the camper? I goes, no, you can't sleep in the camper because the heater doesn't work, and it's cold and it's dusty in there, and I haven't cleaned it out. So you can sleep in your bed, and what I'll do is I'll let you sleep on my side, and that didn't work. So anyway, we've been thinking about it, and it's been fun. We did our first day of tabernacles, and I woke her up and told her, I said, well, today's first day of tabernacles is a Sabbath. It is. She says, I thought it started 2 weeks ago. I says, Carol, I says, remember Yom Teruah? She goes, yeah. I said, that's the beginning of the 7th month. And that's, so really that's what this is all about. This is not about the beginning, but it's about the end and the new beginning. Right, David?
You got it.
And so that's where the celebration should be, is that looking at this not as it's the end of the 7-month cycle. It's the end of his feast days, his cycles, his appointed times in that first 7-month period. But it's also a picture of the beginning of the next life, of that eternal life in the kingdom of heaven with him. So anyway, a few years ago, when it was at Tabernacles, I did a teaching at the suggestion of David Gibson, of course, because I asked him a few questions about stones and why it was happening, and he said, well, why don't you do a teaching on it next week when we're doing Tabernacles? And I goes, well, why don't you just, he goes, well, why don't you just do it? Do a study on it. He says, then you'll learn something. I said, all right, so I did it. Anyway, so I thought I would recap it on a 4 years difference in how you study and how you look at things is amazing. So instead of looking at this thing about stones, I started looking at bricks as well. And so if you look at stone, in the Hebrew it's Eben, it's Aleph Bet Nun. And if you look at that Aleph Bet, that's Abba. Of course, the Aleph is the ox. If you go and look at the meanings of the letters, the Hebrew alphabet, the ancient alphabet, had not just a figure, which was a pictorial thing, it had a name and it had a title. So the picture of the Aleph is the ox, and the name its name is the ox. It looks like an ox, so the title is an ox, but its name is the ox, but the title of it is strength, okay? So it has several names for it: strength, leadership, governor, cornerstone. It can be a lot of things when you start looking at the letters on it. So when you look at the Aleph Bet, you're looking at the Father, okay? It's a very simple thing to look at. Just looking at the Aleph, you can look at the strength, and that's representation throughout the scriptures of the Creator. The Bet is about a house, and the house is this picture is about the Aleph, the Father, and the Son, Ben, B-N, that's Aleph Bet Nun, so B-N, Ben, you would see the Son in there, so it's the Father, the Son, and the house, and it's the Father building that house with his Son as the leader, and he's the protector of it, guarding the gate of it. could draw it up on the board, but I think if you just put a picture of a sideways G as the opening of a gate or a house, but it also could be a tent or any type of dwelling. But the picture I'm trying to get across is that this stone came about because reading, it's about the clarity of things, of trying to hook things together, okay? There's the pictures and you've heard John talk about pictures and like things, a picture of something in another context, in the same context somewhere else throughout scriptures, and you're going to see it several times throughout the scriptures with this word stone. So if you're reading in Genesis, let's go back to the beginning first, okay? Just for the beginning. In the Hebrew, there's 7 letters in that first sentence. It's Bereshit, Elohim creates, and it has Aleph Tav in there. Aleph Tav is the first and the last letter of the alphabet, and it's in several places. It's putting his signature on it. This is what I'm telling you. This is what it is. This is mine. This is my word. The Bereshit, it says created the Shamayim, the heavens, and the Eretz, or the earth. And it's just 7 words. And the middle letter in there, that and, is the U. It's just like that U, the U, the Vav, I think is how you say it, and it's the 6th letter of the alphabet. It also is a representative of the man, and it's 7 letters, and the 6th letter happens to be the middle letter of those things is the U, okay? Man was made on the 6th day. When we look at the creation, once he created light, he stood back and he said it was good. Who is the light? What was the light that we were getting, and what is the light we have today? We can look at this as the light, Yeshua. It's the word that he's presenting to us throughout the scriptures is light. It's the picture, it's the way, it's the walk. After that, when you go through each verse after that, each day after that, he says it was good. He stepped back when he finished it, and it's good. On the 6th day, when he created all the living things, the plants, the green, the grass, all of the animals, and man, said it was very good. And it wasn't just very good, it was mean he made everything as well as it can be, and you don't need to add anything to it. Except when man came around and started thinking and started adding things to it. So when you go back into this picture again, back to this stone, we have the Aleph Bet Nun, it means a stone. We look at the second chapter, verse 11, when it talks about the rivers. And it says, the first river goes through, and it is the land of gold. Gold is the purest thing there is, and it's representative of the Creator. And you can look at the tabernacle and see how much gold was in the set apart place, and the set apart the holy place and the Holy of Holies. The Ark of the Covenant that he sat on, and the lid and the mercy seat and the cherubim, everything was gold. The purest form, the purest thing there is. You can't change gold. You can't make it anything but gold. It's gold. And it's the most valuable thing. It's a picture of the Creator of the heavens and the earth. So when we look at that, we see gold. And it even tells us in the next verse that gold, in verse 11, it's gold was precious. And then it goes and talks about the onyx stone. And that's where my study started. And I was asking Dave about it, and this is how it got started. That onyx stone is not just black. It can be any variation of the color spectrum from clear to black, okay? It's a picture of man. One stone that represents every color spectrum there is. If we can invent any more, it's in there, okay? It's in that. And it's a picture of man in its entirety, the way that he made him. In his image, he made man. So we have to remember that now we are all alike. We all had the same mother and father in the beginning. When they went out of the garden and started procreating, we all had the same mother and father. Our DNA goes back to Adam and Eve. All right? So anyway, it just got off a little bit, but when I started doing this study, I thought this is going to be pretty easy. I'm just going to go through the scriptures and find out all the places that this has stone in there. So I started researching, and it depends on which translations you're looking at. And trying to go to the Hebrew, it says there's so many times that stone is in the scriptures, and then you can go someplace else and it's 300 and something, and here it's 200 and something, right? So I thought, well, maybe I'll just start looking, right? Well, when I start looking at stones, there's also places, the connotations, talking about a stone or a cornerstone or a support or a pillar or whatever, that you can always relate back to stones. Or if you want to take the Creator's place, we can make them bricks, okay? So, looking at the pictures of stone, we have men, we have the Creator that created man, and he took man and he put him on the earth. Then he didn't like the way they were, so he took out one man, he took out Noah, and set him apart with his family. And as we read in, they went through the flood and they came off of the ark, and the first thing they did was, we get the genealogy of Shem and Ham, and what's the other one?
Japheth. Yeah.
Japheth, yeah. So anyway, we get those 3 generations, and then we go look at the people, or we get a picture of the people scattering out over the plains, and the first thing they do, they come to a certain area. These are the children of Shem. These are the relationships of Noah. These are the people that had to know of the flood. I would imagine if we have in your family things that happened in the family when you were a kid, and you tell your kids about your dad, who's their grandfather, or your great-grandfather, or your grandfather, who is their great-grandfather, and you start telling them things, they understand where the family come from. It's kind of, like the family history. So we have to look at these people. They had to know that there was a Creator. Noah certainly would have talked about it and told his people. Well, his people were part of it, his children. So their children. But we had these people that the first thing they did when they got off on their own, they started going out, they decided to build a house or a building. And if we go to Genesis 11:1, and somebody wants to turn there. And so I'm going to read it from the King James, and it says, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain, and in that land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone." And this is where the problem started with man. So when we look back in the beginning, man created everything. And he said it was very good. The earth was created.
You misspoke.
Huh?
Yeah.
You misspoke. You said man created
Okay.
everything.
I'm sorry. Elohim, Yahuwah, created, I'm sorry.
There we go. My brain.
I've got this thing about men on my brain, and I've been looking at this and I'm thinking, what a mess we are. Anyway. So anyway, the Creator said it was very good. Okay? That is a side point. Do you know when he did the 7th day and he rested, he never said it was good or very good or anything. David, and why did he do that?
Because he's waiting to do it.
Absolutely, because that 7th day that he's waiting for has not come. That's for us, and then it will be very good. So anyway, I remember that. Dave taught that one time in the prison because guys were trying to figure it out. Anyway, this thing with this bricks, and by the way, as you read through the first nine verses of chapter 11, the olive top is right in the middle of these things. It's because the Creator was there, and he was doing his works. All right? So when they were building those bricks, he came along and he knew what was happening because he put them there. He was there. He was watching over them. So this is not like, I mean, he didn't put it in their brain. He didn't put it in their mind. But when we talk about his plan that never changes,
Right.
you guys have all heard that, his plan, and it never changes. This was part of his plan. When I looked at this, and I mentioned it before, and I thought about it before, they're making bricks instead of stone. So they're making something that's replacing something that the Creator made. Stones, I don't think you can find two stones exactly alike. I would think not, okay? It would be a heck of a search if you did. And if you did, it would be amazing, okay? But the stones are made perfect. And he says, no chisel should ever touch them. Have you read that in the scriptures? When they're making an altar or they're building something, no chisel would, don't hone the stones, no chisels. He wants them left in their state, and he wanted man to be left in that state. But he also, stones will live forever and never change. They don't have the ability to change themselves. But man does, because they got a heart and a mind, and man's changed. And they did it among themselves, and you can see this in this picture of it. So that's what they did, is they created what the Creator called stumbling blocks. So as I look through it, we can go through and see stumbling blocks all the way through scriptures. How many stumbling blocks did the Creator put in front of them when they were going through the land? By the way, when they went into Egypt, what were they doing? Building bricks. So they were building the structure of their life around the formation of these bricks, because that was their livelihood to live in Egypt, right? Until the time that Moses came in, okay? But when they were there, they were building bricks. They were doing man's thing, building man's way, working in man's life and man's, governing ways. So when they went through the wilderness, did the Creator ever put a stumbling block in front of them? Did you ever see one? Did you ever see a stumbling block? Because all you saw was lack of faith. Because he had his plan. He was going to make sure they were going to the promised land. He wasn't going to put anything out there to stop them. But they made the stumbling blocks. They were the ones that said, well, we're thirsty, we don't have water. You look at this water. They never went to Moses and says, where's the water? But they complained, and they usually blamed Moses for it. And Moses would strike, one time he'd take the branches out or put them in to cure the water, strike the rock, talk to the rock, speak to the rock, whatever it was. The stumbling blocks were what they put in front of them. Every time they came to one of those things, what did they say? We should go back to Egypt, where we had free food and we had fish. We had leeks and onions. But the Creator never put a stumbling block in it. Man, through his life, has put all the stumbling blocks. I guess my talk on this is more about the stumbling blocks, the bricks, than it is about the stones. But we have to remember that when they were doing the tabernacle and they were doing the breastplate, stones was a very important part of it. And to make sure that you understand that man was made as living stones by the Creator. The stones on the breastplates represented men, and they were by each tribe. When we go to Revelation, what do we see?
Right. You see it in 1 Peter 2, he calls it out too. He reminds us that we're living stones.
Right. Well, I had that in there somewhere. I was going to get to the New Testament, but
Oh,
that's
sorry
good.
about that.
And in fact, I was going to say, I was trying to figure out, just start getting off for a minute, I was looking for stones in the New Testament, right? I said, one place it says there's 50 of them. But you have to remember they have stoned and stone where they jump off the, push him off, the pillar down onto the rocks when he's, being tested by Hasatan. But there's all different kinds of little connotations. Some say 50, some say 60, some say 29 or something like that. But what we're looking for is the stones. And so the most that you see, Peter is one. But when you look at Revelation, we're going to get white stones, right? And then you have the 12 stones that are the names of each tribe. They represent each tribe. And they have the 12 foundations that, well, depending on where you're reading, some commentaries say, well, the 12 stones are the 12 apostles, but the 12 stones are the tribes. It's the foundations of the building. They don't call them stones, are the 12 apostles, I think, or the 12 disciples. So they're intertwined there, okay? But the idea is that the stones are precious, and they were put on the earth to represent man. So what have we done when some places said the temple was made out of stones, but when Solomon's making it, they were cutting them, and they were breaking them and moving them, okay? So they were not the way the Creator wanted them to be. So was that a clean place? If it wasn't according to the Creator, then that temple that they built would have been something other than what he wanted. He already had the tabernacle up in Shiloh, but they built that temple. And even today, that temple is a stumbling block for not only Yehuda that's living there, that's alive today, but the people out here. I've had Messianic teachers that say, oh, you can't, they're going to rebuild the altar, and then they're going to rebuild the temple. No, they're not going to rebuild the temple. First of all, the temple's sitting in this room. If I'm not mistaken, Yeshua said we were the dwelling place of the Creator. We were the temple or the tabernacle. Temple, in the definition in the Greek of temple, is a sanctuary. Sanctuary is a dwelling, and his dwelling place was a tabernacle. Translators just made it temple. He never lived in the temple. His name was on the temple, but he never lived there. Which started out, if you really want, and I want everybody to go there, and I'm sorry I got all the way off of the bricks, but I just want you to know we're all living stones. And we're not perfect, and we're ever changing. But in 2 Kings, just a minute. Better get my notes out. In 2 Kings, I think it's chapter 29. John, tell me.
Well, I
When,
would if I knew where your thought.
Okay, it's when the king goes in and cleans out the temple, or the tabernacle, or the temple. That'd be right before they went to Babylon. Man, I didn't put it down, John.
29.
Huh? Is it 20? I think it's 29, right?
25. 25 is
Who's got it?
25 is the last chapter of 2 Kings.
25 is?
Yeah.
Okay. Can't be 29.
No.
Okay, just hold on a second.
Are you talking about when he came in and he burned down the house of Yahweh?
Yeah, it's chapter 23,
Oh,
right?
okay.
It said the sovereign sent, and they gathered all the elders of Yehuda Elohim. And the sovereign went up to the house of Yahuwah with all the men of Yehuda and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the house of Yahuwah. That would have been the Torah of Moses, I would believe. And the sovereign stood by the column and made a covenant before Yahuwah to follow Yahuwah and to guard his commandments and his witness and his laws and all his heart and all of his being, to establish the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people stood at the covenant. Then the sovereign commanded, what is that, Hezekiah?
Hilkiah.
That, huh?
Hilkiah.
Okay. The high priest, I got a different, the Hebrew thing in there. That the high priest and the priest of the second order and the doorkeepers that bring out of the hekel all of Yahuwah, all the objects that were made for Baal. So if you read in there, this is the king that cleaned out the
23.
Chapter 23, 2 Kings 23. He's cleaning out everything that was in there from the time that Solomon built the temple. Solomon built the temple, and the first thing he did when he started bringing in wives, they brought in their religious artifacts, or whatever you would want to call them. Okay, so he's and of the Asherah, the tree climbers, and all of the host of the Shamaim, the whatever's up there, and they burnt them outside of Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and took their ashes to Bethel, and he put down the black-robed priest, who the sovereigns of Yehuda had appointed to burn incense on the high places in the cities of Yehuda, and in the places all around Jerusalem, and who burn incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, to the constellations, and to all the hosts of the Shamaim, or the hosts of heaven. So, the point that I'm making is that the temple became an absolute, the Creator would have never dwelt there. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And he never dwelt there. His name was on it. His name was supposed to be on it. But they always called it Solomon's temple or Herod's temple or somebody else's temple. They didn't call it Yahuwah's house. Yeshua did. My Father's house was to be a house of prayer, which it was supposed to be. Solomon prayed to the Creator that this would be a house of prayer for all the people of the world, that if they looked in the direction, prayed in the direction of the temple, that their prayers would be heard. And then the first thing he did was build a wall around it so nobody could come in except the Yehudites. So he blocked out the northern tribes, which was another point of separation, and John's probably taught on that several times too, as well as David. But my point being here is that this became a major stumbling block in man's lives. And we today still have that stumbling block, because we still have these talks of them being rebuilt. We still have the brothers Yehuda that are living in that little piece of dirt that's only it's a fraction of what the Creator gave them. Even if it's only a fraction of what Yehuda, the area of Yehuda was. That they're still in their priesthood, trying to figure out who's of the house of Levi, so that they can get their priesthood going, trying to figure out how they're going to build this temple, and where they're going to build it, because they want to put it on the Temple Mount, where it was supposed to be, where it was originally. So, where does that take man when we look at it from the Christian standpoint? When they look at that, they go along with it. I'm not talking about us, okay? Don't look at me as a bad person, but I don't claim to be a Christian, okay? Because I'm a follower of Yah, and I'm trying the best I can to follow him, all right? And every day I trip, okay? And I get back up and I start over again. But my point is this: people today, even in the religious communities, are still looking at Yehuda as this, that the scriptures are about Yehuda. The Old Testament is about Yehuda. We know that if you've studied it and you've been to any teaching, that Genesis was a whole story about building the family called Israel. It started with the creation of man, Adam and Eve, through Noah, through Abraham, through Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes that ended up and when he changed them to Israel, they're Israel, my children. That's what he did in Genesis. He built the house. He showed him how that house was built. With all the flaws that were in there. We've seen the mistakes that people made in there. We've seen what they did to their brother Joseph. We've seen the things that happened with Laban. There's another point. When you look at Laban, is actually the same word for bricks. The same spelling for bricks. Right? So when you look at that, there might be a clue there. I don't think it's a happenstance. I think it's really there for a reason, because Laban represented outside of the house of Israel, the family outside of it, those that were worshipers of idols, of whatever they had, their household idols. I don't know what their main idol would have been. Dagon or something like that, I don't know what it would have been. But they would have had a household idol, and then they would have had a major idol that they worshiped. That was Laban. So he sets that picture for us, clear back there when they're building we're building the bricks for that Tower of Babel. And then when we get the confusion of the language, which if you look at it, he says the earth was separated, okay, at the time of Peleg. Well, a lot of people look at that as an earthquake, but he is saying in one verse, he's talking about Peleg, and when the earth was divided, and in another time he's talking about dividing the earth with the tongues.
Territories.
Huh?
Territories.
Yes, territories. But, okay, I put territories, but they say the earth, but it would have been territories wherever they went, because they start naming them off. So he divided it with tongues. So that puts us into another confusion state and puts us into more stumbling blocks. But he didn't make it. They made the stumbling blocks, and they were the ones that he's trying to cure to break those stumbling blocks up by scattering men around so that they can't get together with one mind to do one thing, which we look at today. We look at us today. In this country, nobody thinks alike out there anymore, I don't think. But we're we have a lot of problems out there in this country today. Look at the political scene. And I'm not into politics, but just look at what's happening out there. It's the division of man, the separation of man, the fighting of man, fighting for their own ways. None of them are, who's fighting for the Creator's ways? Okay? Now, I know each one of us are fighting our own battles to make our way in there, to be clean, to be accepted, to do his things. We have all the tools. We know what the tools are. He's given them to us. So we're all working at that. We're all in pursuit of his Torah. But the world outside, those ones that were building the bricks, that are still building things with bricks instead of with the 10 Commandments. So now there's a set of stones that we can talk about, right? They're there in the Creator's hand, in the Shamayim, sitting in that Ark of the Witness that's described in Revelation. It's his. He's sitting on it. It's there. That's where those 10 tablets are, the ones that he wrote on, the broken ones. That was the testimony against man, okay? Kind of getting off in a big circle here, but going back to the chaos that we have in the world is caused by the stumbling blocks that man has put in front of himself. Yeshua never put a stumbling block in front of anybody. In fact, he says, don't do that. He looks at the people on the outside that they're blind, right? Don't put stumbling blocks in front of a blind person. Well, on the outside, if they're not familiar with the Torah, they're not familiar with the teaching and instructions, which is all they are, is instructions of love. If you look at his covenants, this whole thing with man is based on love. Unconditional love by him. Now, I don't mean that he doesn't have conditions. I mean, no matter what, his love for man is going to remain the same. and it'll never change. He created man in his own image, and he said they was very good. So he must have been happy with it. He might be a little unhappy with it today. So as we're looking through the scriptures and we're reading and looking at today's times, and we have things going on, well, we have wars in Israel, we got east again, we got them coming from the north and the west. Let's see, Palestine's the west, north, east, and from the south, I guess, right now, when you look at it, you got the Houthis, you got the Hezbollah, you got Hamas, and you got Iran, and they're surrounded by all these people. But that's man. The Creator said he's letting it happen. If he wanted to stop it, I guess he could, at any time, he could make his plan come to fruition, but I don't think that's his plan. His plan is to put man into the most telling parts that there's just absolutely no place to come out of before he's going to do anything to change, to come back. Remember that there has to be a great ingathering of the house of Israel before there's a falling away. The falling away hasn't happened yet, because the falling away has to happen from the house of Israel. But getting back to these building blocks that we built, we've got political systems that we built that no matter what we do, today we have people out there, and unfortunately too many are out there going to vote for this person, this man or this woman, whatever the case may be, that will fit their needs and who will fix it the way they want it fixed. I don't think any of them ever prayed to the Creator and say, I'm waiting for you to fix it. You know? We don't do that. We ask man to do it. We even talk about it. We even pray about it. And we sometimes pray. I've heard people pray, preachers on the big screen there at the house, praying for the Creator to send us a man that will take us out of this trouble. We don't need a man, we need the Creator. Right? And so that's typical of us. And it goes all the way back to this thing of the building of that Tower of Babel. Even in the script, how many times he tells us, come out of her, get out, come out of her, my people, right? But he knows who his people are. And we're his people, but we're continually working against ourselves within the world that we live in, unknowingly. Now, there's nobody in this room who's going to change anything that goes on out in that world. Even if we all got together and we got everybody to vote exactly the way we wanted, I wanted, whether it was him or her or they or them, we're not going to change anything, because I do read history and I know history. Man has been in charge of the things that went on the earth for how long? In his mind. Go back to Rome, go back to Greece. Who would be before that? The Persians.
Yeah, Persians, the Assyrians.
Okay, so all of those people, what were they doing? Taking charge and ruling over other men. And they've never fixed anything. Everything that they've ever done has never fixed it. All of the things that the United States did, the greatest country in the world, if you really wanted to look at it comparing to other countries, never fixed anything. They just make things, try to cover them up as they go, but they've never fixed it, because we still have the same problems today as we had 20 years ago, 50 years, or probably 100 years ago, okay? So anyway, the Tower of Babel, what a spot. So let's go to Thessalonians. I got it wrote down somewhere, guys. Just give me a minute. I know Valerie likes it when I go through all my papers. Oh man, John, how'd you do that? Well, I lost it. Okay. I think it's 2 Thessalonians, and the Creator talks. I have to have it here. I got everything. Second Thessalonians, chapter 2, verse 11. John, are you there?
Yep.
Read that.
And for this reason, God will send a strong delusion that they should believe a lie.
Okay. What do you think that strong delusion might be? Anybody have a clue in there? Now, this is the delusion out of the New Testament. This is not something Peter is taking out of the Old Testament. He's taking it out of the New Testament. First of all, remember, Creator came down, Yeshua, and walked the earth and taught disciples that were to teach disciples that would teach disciples. And what did he come for? Proclaiming the kingdom of heaven was at hand. He taught them the Creator's name, and he walked the Torah. He lived the Torah. He didn't write it. He walked it, he lived it, he was a living, walking example of it. We don't have that today. But yet, look where we're at today, even though they had that. But in this particular, Peter and Paul, isn't that Paul is part of that, writing that? Paul and Peter. And they're writing that he is going to send a strong delusion that even the saints might believe.
You know, I've never thought about that in this passage before, but just as you're saying this right now and you ask that question, what would that delusion be? Peace.
Huh?
See,
Huh?
if you're using the pattern of Tower of Babel,
Yeah,
because that's what he did at that time.
right.
He brought this delusion upon them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's gonna mix things up. That's how I see it.
Well, what is it? It's going to be so strong that it's going to fool people,
Yeah,
even
exactly.
even his own.
If it was possible.
If it were possible, I don't think it's possible in here. It could be, but I don't think it is. Think of the system, the religious systems in the world today. Now, we just went through what the temple was about, and all of the idols that were in there, and it took, I don't know how many years it took to get to that one king, and he wasn't the first king to find those writings, because there were good kings in there that found them and read them. But none of them ever cleaned out the temple. He was the first one that cleaned it out, and he cleaned out all the surroundings. The black robed priests, the priests that were praying to the Asherahs, the trees, and those that were burning incense to the stars and the moon, the constellations, okay? He was the first one to do that. But then when they came back from Babylon, what did they bring with them? They brought more. When they came back from Babylon, they brought more of the same thing back from Babylon. They brought back Babylon's religious systems. They changed their own words, their own means of communication, even using the Babylonian block script to change from the Paleo-Hebrew. And I think if you go in there and you read, Daniel was still understood what the Paleo-Hebrew was, and was still had that known what that was. That's why he stood out, because he could define, or what was the definition of dreams that the Creator gave him the ability to do, showed him. But at that time they even changed the writing, how they wrote the language. And don't get me wrong, you can read the scriptures, you can get a Hebrew and you can read it, but it's not the same as the Paleo-Hebrew. But the one thing that the Masoretes did when it was changed, they left the Paleo-Hebrew in there, the symbols for the Creator's name, as it was in the Paleo script. They never changed that. But they changed it, so they had to, like, you can look in there and get a word, aben, for example. You can find it 2 or 3 times with different, that they add a definition, and this builds on this builds on this, and this builds on this. So but it's the same spelling, the same thing. They just changed, well, if you pronounce it this way, it's going to be this, and if you pronounce it this way, it'll be a different meaning. So they've changed that. But look what they've done with the religious systems today. I don't even know anymore. I try to count how many different systems there are out there and how many different denominations there are. And most of them all have truth in them. Some truth. But the scripture relies on two things. The statutes of Yahuwah and the testimony of Yeshua. Those two things. Yahuwah's covenants and commandments, the 10 commandments, and the things that he would, that he drew in, that Moses wrote about. Those things are of Yahuwah. Yeshua came and he lived them and he swore to them. He is the testimony that said, what the Father wrote is true. This is how you do it. And he showed him. So the two things is the covenants of Yahuwah, understanding them and following them, and accepting the testimony of Yeshua that they're real. I think that's a good way to say it. I don't know. That's the only two things. So when you look in all of those deals out there, a lot of places, they wipe the whole New Old Testament out, the Tanakh. They take the Torah out. They take the Tanakh. You know how many guys from the prison write me and ask me could you send me a copy of the Torah? Seriously, don't they, Dave?
No, yeah.
Dave's been there. Could you send us a copy of the Torah? They're still holding the scriptures in their hand. They don't realize they have it in their hand. They think it's something different. Torah is simply teaching and instructions. It's his instructions. It's his teachings. And he wrote them in stone. It's pretty easy. And he wrote them in stone on a stone that he created. And he wrote it with his finger. Probably the most precious stone there is out there, I would say. Or stones. There was 2 tablets. So today we have, and I'm not bashing religions, okay? Because some of them they all have, like I said, they all have something in there that's true. But they also have a lot of commentary that distracts us and moves people away from what the covenants and commandments were, who Yeshua really was. Like I was reading one, I popped up a bunch of commentaries the other day, and I was just kind of looking. By the way, Carol said she was almost going to come today, but she was not up to. Anyway, she says, I was just going to go over there and tell him I came to listen to my husband do a 1-hour teaching on 27 hours that he spent on the computer in the computer room. I said, you don't want to do that. She says, well, I said, it wasn't 27 hours. She said, well, it's pretty close. I said, what, are you keeping track of it? She said, well, you've been in there every day. I said, she said, the yard work isn't getting done.
Nope.
It'll still be there. It ain't going nowhere. But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. I said, boy, you put a lot of faith in me, honey. You wouldn't have heard much. I said, when I come home, I'll read it to you. And so, anyway, my point is, that delusion is out there today. And people are being fooled by it. We have people that I thought would never change. And we had Carl Farriman. You remember Carl?
Carl.
One of these guys that grabbed a hold. He was one of these guys that would get in a fight over it. If you doesn't agree with him, he can take you out in the yard. Just one of the inmates, you know. I think Bo was one the same way, but he got whipped because he was such a little guy. But he still fought hard. But anyway, as soon as he got out, he found a gal that was, I think she's drug rehab counselor for the county of San Diego, way up there. She's the supervisor. And he was in a drug rehab program because that's what got him in there, and he was out. Got with her, ended up marrying her. Boy, and this overnight he went, oh, he's right back into where he came out of with the Christianity. And don't get me wrong, but whatever walk he was in was not walking with what we were teaching him in the school. And we didn't teach him religion. We taught him relationship. And that's where man has failed, because most of them want the relationship to be through some pastor, you know, that we're going to rely on him to make sure that, you know, our salvation or whatever is ready. But the relationship is an individual relationship. Everybody in this room has a different relationship with the Creator than the person that's sitting next to you or that you live with. no matter what you think. Your relationship is different because it has to come from the heart. It has to come through you. So I tell Carol that too. I have a different relationship than you do. Oh, no, you don't. She'll argue the point, but it's cool. But she has different things that she relies on, and I have things that I rely on that maybe we shouldn't, but we still have that relationship that we're striving for with the Creator. So when you look at these things that happen, every one of them was moving away from the Creator. You ever notice that, and I know you noticed, the gate on the tabernacle was always pointed in what direction?
East.
To the east, right? And when you look at the people that were leaving, they came out of the east. In other words, they were walking away from Yahuwah, because everything that he has is in the east. When they were in Egypt and they left, their stopping point would be in an easterly direction, although it was somewhat northeast from Egypt. But they always went in an easterly direction until they got to the point where they went in the land. But they were going into the land of promise, the kingdom of heaven. But when they were walking and they were in the wilderness, the gate was always pointed towards the east. They were always in an easterly direction, walking towards the Creator. When you read over here in Genesis, they were walking away from, they coming out of the east and going to the west, which is a picture of walking away from the Creator. So which way are we walking? We should be looking to the east, right? Aren't we? That was Alan. That's where the way, that's there. That's where he was. That's why those doors were open. We come in through the east gate. When they started that years ago, 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. I don't know when they started it, but that's what that was, the east gate. And he had all of his, everything that he did was coming out of the east, man. He's always in his mind. Very smart man. And a very lovable one too. But anyway, my whole point, I know I've said this over and over again. We are in a world today, and I didn't mean to get off onto this thing, but I want you to think about this. There's this delusion out there. It's because we're delusional people. We'll follow it. I think we follow anything. I think mankind would follow anything if you look through there. Hopefully our hearts are put in the direction that we are walking to the Creator daily, looking for Him to solve our answers. And I think that's what it's all about. But I want you to think about these stumbling blocks and how many stumbling blocks are rolling in front of us as we're on our daily walk with the Creator. We have to be able to pick those up and look at them. And I'm still, like I said, I trip every day, and I get up and figure out what I'm doing and try to not do it again, okay? They might just be little things, but we need to remember that. So I'll close with that. And I just want you to, I know I get a little repetition sometimes, but when my heart's into something, and this didn't start, this teaching that I was going to do about the stones and the bricks, ended up all about the bricks and the stumbling blocks. But I did like, there's the parts in there, the stones that are in Revelation, the 12 stones in Revelation and the 12 stones that are on the breastplate are probably the same stones, even though they have some different names in Revelation. But you have to remember the Greek translation to whatever it went to, something could have been lost in it. And trying to find their definitions is really hard to do. But I'm pretty sure that those same stones exist. Did you know also in Ezekiel there were 10 stones? And they were the 10 precious stones that were in the garden. So I was trying to figure that out. One commentary says that's about Satan, but I think the 10 stones is more about man. What does the number 10 stand for? Do you remember?
Well, we were thinking about that the other day.
Yeah. I think I wrote it down.
I want to say completion.
Huh?
I want to say completion.
Yes, it is completion. It's about coming to a completion.
Yeah,
12 is governing.
yeah.
7 is Yah, 6 is man. So when we look at those stones, they're important stones, and stones are an important part of it. And gold is specifically the purest thing that we have, and the purest thing that we have in here is the Creator's word, the Creator himself. Gold, it won't be broken down, won't be pure. Yeshua stands as silver. Think about that. The next most precious. And sometimes they're considered stones. In the scriptures, they'll say the stone, a gold stone, and silver. But those two are set there for a reason in that kind of an order. It's not anything supernatural. It's just giving you their authority, because Yeshua stands for everything that the Creator created and everything that he said. But the purity of everything is with the Creator. And of course, if you read the scriptures, you know that Yeshua was actually the embodiment, the fleshly embodiment of the Creator himself. He even says so. You've seen me, you've seen the Creator. So anyway, I'm going to close with that, and I hope I didn't bore you with it, but one thing I want you to do is just take it into your thoughts and think about it when you're reading the scriptures, and just a minute, when you're thinking about things, what are the stumbling blocks that we lay in front of ourselves and then we trip over them? John?
Those living stones from Peter,
Mm-hmm.
I looked it up in the Greek and went through the Septuagint back to what it is in the Hebrew, and it goes back to, you remember that place in Genesis where them 4 rivers are?
Yeah, back to the garden, right?
That's the first place it was used.
Yeah, that's the very first place that stone's in there.
Yeah.
And it's moved, and again, it was, and it's prevalent when Jacob's going to find his wife, and he puts his head on that stone, and he dreams the dream, and he's called that stone Bethel, the house of Yah. And when he came out, it was about stones. When he built the pillar of stones, and they put their, well, and going in too, there was stones. He had to roll the stones. To roll the stone, move the stone, move the stone. How many times did it show it in there? 4 or 5 times that they rolled this stone. And those stones are a picture of man, moving man out of the way to make his path to where the Creator wanted him to go.
Crossing
Just a
the Jordan.
thought. Would you think of that?
Yeah.
Possibly. But it's about men. Okay. All right. I'll let it go. It's you guys want to do the blessing? Time for the blessing?
It's time for
Now it's time to
prepare our hearts to receive the blessing.